Minister, I want to raise the issue of what I believe is your intention to grant prospecting licences for base metals, gold and silver ores over a significant number of townlands in Leitrim. The prospecting licences were initially given to OMA Minerals, but they ran out in 2020, and new licences are now being applied for by Flintbridge, a new company, but 3 of its 4 officers are formerly officers of OMA Minerals. Now, Minister, your intention has come as a shock and a nasty surprise to the local community for a number of reasons. First of all, this community, the farmers, the tourism operators, the fishermen, and right across society in Leitrim and internationally have in recent years campaigned vigorously to ensure that fracking would not be permitted because they wanted to preserve their landscape, their clean air, their clean water and public health. Thankfully, that campaign was successful, and congratulations to all involved and to a former TD, Tony McLaughlin, who played an important role in that. Now, Minister, as I said, many people are aghast at the idea that Ireland, after declaring a climate and biodiversity emergency in 2019, is considering issuing prospecting licences to the mining industry. Minister, during my last term in the European Parliament, one of the most important pieces of legislation that we put through was establishing the circular economy. This is now in our statute books, and Ireland has committed to establishing this economy. Gold mining has no place in this. In the mining industry, a large number of harmful chemicals that can negatively impact air and water quality are used, such as mercury and cyanide. Indeed, it's estimated that to produce enough raw gold to make a single ring, 20 tonnes of rock and soil are dislodged and discarded. And I think what concerns a lot of people is they've heard first-hand reports from OMA concerning the lived experience, the negative human, societal and environmental damage that gold mining has done. We have been told by the GSRO that these are prospecting, not mining licences, and don't confer any right to mine. But let's look at the reality of that, Minister. Companies apply for prospecting licences based on geological information. If such a licence is given, the company may then invest money prospecting, and there is a significant expectation they will apply for a mining licence. And this is all the more likely because last year, global production of gold fell by 1%. So now we are left that they are looking at the more difficult deposits to extract. Now, I mentioned earlier the first-hand accounts from OMA, a mine that's in operation since the early 200s. The area in question is very significant, with one site covering 71 square miles, another 96. You have various ponds, you have Kearney pits, you have polishing ponds and processing plants, all in a pristine environment. And that's the picture that's painted by the people of Omagh. But, Minister, if you ever visited the glens of North Leitrim, you'd be horrified at the idea that this was even a possibility. Finally, Minister, to suggest that a prospecting licence is just that and no more is like saying that a person who does their driving test and then invests in buying a car is simply doing it to see if they can pass the test. The truth is, they're doing it so that they can drive their car. Minister.
Thank you, that's concurrent. Thank you, Deputy Harkin. My department did publish a notice of intention to grant 2 prospecting licences in North Leitrim in a local newspaper on the 7th of October last. Submissions on these applications can be made to my department until midnight, the 7th of November this week. It is this week. Details are available on the department's website. All valid submissions will be considered before a final decision is made on whether or not to grant the 2 prospecting licences in question. It's important that we all understand the difference between a prospecting licence, a mining licence or lease, and the robust standards that are in place to ensure that both distinct activities meet the highest environmental standards and the people's concerns are addressed. A prospecting licence allows the holder to prospect for specified minerals in a defined geographic area. The majority of prospecting licences carried out under a prospecting licence are temporary and involve minimal disturbance. All proposed exploration activities are the subject of environmental screening by my department. This ensures that that will not give rise to any significant adverse effects on the environment. If a prospecting licence is granted, it does not confer the licensee with any rights, allowing it to undertake mining, and no intrusive prospecting activities such as drilling or trenching can be undertaken without the express consent of the landowner or tenant. It's also worth noting that very few prospecting licences ever lead to mining. Mining is a very different activity to prospecting in terms of its scale and potential environmental impact, and is regulated accordingly. Mining requires 3 additional and separate consents. It requires planning permission from the local authority. This will involve a full environmental impact assessment and public consultation. To re-emphasise the point that a mining authorisation does not automatically follow on from a prospecting licence, I am aware of examples where economically viable mineral deposits have been discovered, but permission to develop them was subsequently refused by the relevant planning authority. An integrated pollution control licence from the Environmental Protection Agency is also required. IPC licences aim to prevent or reduce emissions to air, water and land, to reduce waste and the use of energy resources, make sure that they are done efficiently. IPC licensing also involves a full environmental impact assessment and public consultation. Thirdly and finally, a a mining lease or licence is required from myself as a relevant minister. I would not consider granting a mining licence or a lease until after the planning permission and the IPC licence have been granted. My department is currently finalising a draft policy statement on mineral exploration and mining by considering the submissions made as part of a public consultation that concluded on the 15th of October last. The Government will consider the draft policy statement early next year. The draft policy statement highlights the role of minerals in our everyday lives and the critical role that they will play in our transition to net zero and carbon neutrality by 2050. The draft policy recognises that we need to repair, reuse and recycle more minerals and metals, but this alone will not supply the quantity of minerals required to decarbonise our energy system through solar power, renewable wind energy and batteries. Relying solely on importing minerals risks them being developed in parts of the world where less stringent environmental and human rights standards apply, as well as risking our ability to secure the minerals needed to make the green and digital transition a reality. A key priority in the draft policy statement is building public understanding of and trust in mineral exploration and mining activities. During the course of the public consultation on the draft policy statement, the consent of communities to mining operations and the provision of information that is easily understood emerged as key issues. These issues will be taken forward by my department with the help of an advisory group on mineral exploration and mining, which will be established shortly and will draw on the board on as broad a range of views as possible.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. This week, every single member of Leitrim County Council supported a motion asking you not to grant a prospecting licence for gold mining. That's a very strong statement. Every single councillor from every different party and all independents are asking you not to grant this prospecting licence. Earlier I mentioned fracking. It's worth noting that petroleum licensing options were granted by a Fianna Fáil Green government, but luckily Minister Pat Rabbitte refused to sign off on a prospecting licence when Fine Gael and Labour were in power in 2011, and his decision provided the space for a future government to reconsider the option of fracking, and they did the right thing. Minister, I'm asking you to do the right thing. I don't know how familiar you are with Leitrim. Its farmers will be expected to play their role in ensuring sustainable food production and play their role in sequestering carbon. And indeed, the burden may be heavier on farmers in this area. To be honest with you, Minister, it beggars belief that any decision taken by you might open the door to mining in this pristine landscape. You seem to be saying you would consider granting mining licences. And I'm shocked by this. And you give conflict minerals as an example for this, which is just, it's off the wall. Now, Minister, I listened to your previous response where you mentioned COP26, and what you said was that this is an opportunity to do things in a better way and to act and think differently. Well, that's what I'm asking you to do now. Do not make the mistakes of the previous Fianna Fáil Green government. Do things in a better way and do not give permission for companies to prospect for gold in Leitrim.
The Minister to conclude.
First, I am very familiar with North Leitrim particularly. I know that it's a special character of the people and the place. And I absolutely support what Tony McLaughlin you said earlier on, and there was widespread cross-party support for the ban on fracking, which came from local communities. Love Leitrim. And that's hugely significant, has been hugely significant. There is a difference though. Well, we will need base metals in the low carbon transition we're going to make. And we have, there is a question, do we say we'll just import them from other parts of the world where they won't have the same environmental standards, won't have the same environmental regulations? And I don't think that would be the right policy. And we've just gone through a very open public consultation process where we're open to everyone sitting down together. Well, how do we manage that conundrum? Because there are local concerns, clearly. But I don't think saying no to any prospecting for any minerals or base metals, including gold or silver, in that would be the appropriate policy approach. But last thing, can I just get some perspective, because you mentioned the metaphor about this like buying a driving licence. For 50 years, people have been prospecting for gold in our country, all over the country. And not once has a commercial deposit been found. So I think we have to be careful and put perspective on it. The difference between getting a driving licence and then driving a car and 50 years of prospecting which hasn't discovered that metal in commercial find is a real difference. And also, the key issue is if there was one, and the chances are so remote that in my mind we should be careful not to raise concerns that mightn't be based on reality. But if it did, it's only then that you really do look at what the licensing or other conditions, through 3 planning and licensing and ministerial departmental assessments, to look at that issue in terms of what the environmental circumstances are. I don't expect that to be out because the experience of 50 years, it hasn't happened. But I don't believe it would be right appropriate for us to close the door completely on any prospecting for base metals in our country.
Again, Minister.